Chapter 41-26. Third Judicial Magistrate stopped in his tracks and explained with a smile. Just checking it won't hurt you. Yiqing Luo snorted lightly as she leaned against the back of the chair. She bent her elbow and propped up her chin as she looked at Third Judicial Magistrate. No need to check. Miss Yi, what do you mean? Third Judicial Magistrate asked in puzzlement. Yiqing Luo raised her brows. I do have the poison scripture grass on me. The moment she said that. At that moment the surrounding people all sucked in a breath of cold air. Each of them looked at Yiqing Luo in astonishment. Was this admitting? Second Judicial Magistrate laughed out loud as he looked at First Judicial Magistrate complacently. Did you hear that? She has already admitted. First Judicial Magistrate, you have been helping a murderer. And the person she killed is from Linglong Palace. Second Judicial Magistrate paused and sneered. From what I see, you First Judicial Magistrate don't treat our Linglong Palace's disciples seriously. First Judicial Magistrate's face darkened. She clenched her fists tightly to suppress the rising heat as she stared coldly at Second Judicial Magistrate. She wanted to refute but couldn't say a word. Second Judicial Magistrate felt even more annoyed when he saw this. He cupped his fists tightly and knelt down in front of Linglong Palace Master. Palace Master. This person has hurt our Linglong Palace's disciples many times. Now that the evidence is conclusive, would Palace Master please give the order to kill Yiqing Luo? This. Third Judicial Magistrate was shocked as he wanted to persuade Second Judicial Magistrate. But he looked at Yiqing Luo helplessly. Finally he sighed heavily. Miss Yi, how can you do this? If you have any dissatisfaction with Linglong Palace, you can tell the First Judicial Magistrate clearly. As she said that, she closed her eyes with a pained look. That is at least a fresh life and so young. I can't plead for you anymore. Plead for what? Men, suppress this murderer who killed Linglong Palace's disciples. We must use her blood to pay tribute to the dead disciples. Second Judicial Magistrate clamored. In this heavy atmosphere, a melodious laugh rang out, and it was extremely obvious. Everyone was stunned by this laughter. He immediately looked in the direction of the voice. The girl sitting on the chair covered her lips with her slender, jade-like hand. She was smiling so brightly that it was as if she was a beautiful flower. A pair of enchanting eyes curved into a long and narrow arc because of her smile. It was like a poppy in full bloom, slowly blooming at the end of his eyes. The girl slowly sat up straight. Her posture was elegant and noble. His every movement exuded an aura that caused others to tremble in fear. What are you laughing at? The second judge frowned and scolded. Yiqing Luo curled her lips and smiled sweetly. I can't help but want to laugh at your words. What do you mean? Yiqing Luo's eyes were full of ridicule. Those who don't know would think that my relationship with the third judicial officer is so good. It seems that, from the beginning to the end, other than putting all the blame on me, you haven't done anything to plead for me, have you? She made no effort to hide her sarcasm. It also directly moved the purpose of the tripartite justice system to the surface. Don't you like to pretend to be a good person? Don't you like to smooth things over? Then he would expose all of her intentions. Let's see how she could continue to pretend. As expected, the amiable and kind face of the third judicial judge suddenly froze. Her mouth moved. Chapter 41-27. Miss Yi, do you have any misunderstanding towards me? The third judicial magistrate adjusted his emotions and asked. Yiqing Luo's slender fingers brushed over her lips. Immediately she stood up slowly. The moment she stood up, the powerful and majestic aura emanated from her body. Obviously, she looked petite and harmless. But in her charming eyes and smile, it made one's back inexplicably cold. Yiqing Luo curled her red lips. Whether it's a misunderstanding or not, you know it clearly. Miss Yi. The third judicial magistrate's face stiffened and his expression was extremely ugly. I am absolutely not that kind of person. Yiqing Luo's pink lips deepened. The corners of her long and narrow eyes revealed a trace of coldness, like a stream of ice and snow. I have no interest in what kind of person you are, she said. It's just disgusting that you are putting on airs in front of me. If you like to maintain your good guy image, then stay away from me. The third judicial magistrate was infuriated. A murderous intent surged uncontrollably in his pair of dark eyes, although it quickly disappeared in front of his eyes. But this murderous intent, Yiqing Luo could still see it clearly. She curved her lips. She couldn't control her emotions and couldn't help it. Her psychological quality was still too poor. Yiqing Luo. The second judicial magistrate stepped forward and pulled the third judicial magistrate behind him, then stared at Yiqing Luo angrily. What kind of person is the third judicial magistrate? We Linglong Palace know best. Don't think that you can bewitch the first judicial magistrate and sow discord between us and the third judicial magistrate. She sneered, her eyes were filled with hatred. Don't think that deliberately targeting the third judicial magistrate, you can overturn the fact that you killed 4 Linglong Palace's female disciples. The moment the second judicial magistrate finished his words, immediately, those Linglong Palace's female disciples who were surrounding the main hall were suddenly enlightened. This was Yiqing Luo's purpose. Deliberately provoking the feelings between the judicial magistrates, and then using this to shift everyone's attention away from the new female disciples. Indeed, a sinister and cunning woman. Suddenly, among the female disciples, someone knelt down. She shouted loudly, "Hall Master, please uphold justice for Linglong Palace." The moment the words came out, the dozens of female disciples surrounding them were immediately spurred on. In addition to what the second judicial officer had just said, one by one they knelt on the ground. "Hall Master, please uphold justice. Hall Master, please avenge our dead sisters. Hall Master." For a moment the strangely silent hall became noisy. When the second preceptor saw that there were so many female disciples cooperating with him, he immediately felt very confident. He raised his head high and sneered at the big hand, "Take him away." Soon the female guard rushed into the hall. One by one they bowed towards Linglong Palace Lord, who was seated on the main seat, and went up to detain Yiqing Luo. However, they had just taken a step forward. A cold and mocking voice sounded, "So in your eyes I am still the Hall Master. You even know to bow to me." Every single word was heard clearly by his ears. It was as if a heavy boulder was pounding on everyone's heart. The moment the Palace Lord of the Linglong Palace spoke, at that moment the entire hall fell silent. The expressions of the second judge, Protector Fan, and the others who had been arrogant and pleased with themselves froze on their faces. Everyone's heart thumped furiously. Hall Master. What did this mean? Under the strange atmosphere it was silent for several breaths. Chapter 41-28. Second Judicator knelt down. That frightened the surrounding Linglong Palace's female disciples all knelt down. Hence it was the same as before. Everyone knelt down on the ground. Yiqing Luo stood out like a crane among chickens. Her lips curled up as she slowly turned sideways and smiled at Linglong Palace Lord. "Actually, I also feel that. They are treating you as a decoration." Yiqing Luo. Second Judicator shouted angrily, "Stop spouting nonsense over there." After he shouted, he immediately looked at the Linglong Palace Lord with fear and trepidation. "We are absolutely loyal to the Palace Lord. She's the one who's sowing discord." Yiqing Luo smiled as she raised her slender eyebrows. The smile in her eyes added some unknown deeper meaning. "Really? Why is it that when I'm here listening to your long-winded talk I feel?" Second Judicator, you are more like the Linglong Palace Lord. Yiqing Luo's tone was frivolous. She said it in a casual manner. But the words between the words made one's heart palpitate. Second Judicator was so frightened that his face turned pale. "Yiqing Luo, don't slander me. You're intentionally discrediting me in front of Lord Palace Lord." She was more like the Linglong Palace Lord? If these words were said in private, she would absolutely be filled with delight. She had always felt that she was the one who could truly take up the position of Linglong Palace Lord. But these words were placed in the open, especially in front of Linglong Palace Lord. If she provoked Linglong Palace Lord to think too much, Linglong Palace Lord started to be suspicious of her. Could her days in Linglong Palace Lord still be smooth sailing? Yiqing Luo, that slut, how ruthless. Second Judicator was so infuriated that his chest felt stuffy, about to throw up blood. "Lord Palace Lord, I'm innocent. She's intentionally sowing discord, you mustn't believe." "Enough." Linglong Palace Lord squinted her eyes in displeasure, reflecting a chilly glint, like ice and snow, freezing the surrounding air. Ling Long Palace Lord's expression turned ugly. A pair of eyes that seemed to be covered with frost contained a bit of inexplicable coldness. After stopping the second trial, she raised her eyes and met Yiqing Luo's gaze as she spoke out coldly, "You enough, stop stirring up trouble over there." Yiqing Luo shrugged her shoulders, raised her hand and made a zipper action on her mouth. After that, he pursed his lips and returned to his seat beside the Ling Long Palace Lord. "Lord Hallmaster." The second Hallmaster shrunk his neck. The Ling Long Palace Lord glanced at the second and third judges indifferently before raising her eyes and sweeping her gaze over the people kneeling on the ground in front of her. "All of you are making a ruckus over a little girl. Where is your sense of propriety?" No one dared to make a sound. The Ling Long Palace Master's gaze was sharp, and the pressure of a superior person pressed down heavily. The air in the entire lobby became thin. Everyone felt suffocated. However, he did not dare to show any emotions. Fear was written all over everyone's face. Only Yiqing Luo, who was seated by the side, still had that lazy expression on her face, as though she didn't care about anything. "Su Xiao." Ling Long Palace Lord opened her mouth again. Su Xiao, who was kneeling by the side, the lady in charge of the autopsy, responded, "I'm here. Check if Miss Ye's body has been contaminated with the poison scripture grass." Ling Long Palace Lord instructed calmly. Su Xiao kowtowed expressionlessly, "Yes." Following that, she stood up and walked towards Yiqing Luo. This time Yiqing Luo didn't evade. He was extremely cooperative. Chapter 41-29. After the inspection, Su Xiao returned to his original position and continued to kneel down. "How is it?" Ling Long Palace Lord asked. Su Xiao replied respectfully, "I did not find any traces of the poison scripture grass on Miss Yi." Ling Long Palace Lord's gaze swept towards Second Judicial Magistrate. "Second Judicial Magistrate, did you hear me clearly?" Second Judicial Magistrate shuddered. "Yes, I heard you clearly." The Ling Long Palace Master softly called out. Su Xiao seemed to understand the meaning of the Ling Long Palace Master's words. He expressionlessly said, "The poison meridian grass is extremely poisonous. So, if someone comes into contact with the poison meridian grass, their body will definitely be contaminated with its aura. No matter how careful the person who poisoned it is, there would definitely be traces on their body." Su Xiao's explanation, which meant that Yiqing Luo's disgust was completely excluded. Second Judicial Magistrate raised his head and widened his eyes as he pointed at Yiqing Luo. You are intentionally framing me." Rejecting the Third Judicial Magistrate's inspection, and admitting that she had the poison scripture grass on her. Intentionally teasing them. Yiqing Luo shook her head with a grin. "What I said is the truth. I do have the poison scripture grass on me, but I didn't take it out." She touched the Netherworld Phoenix ring on her fingertip. "As for me, not only do I have the poison scripture grass, but I also have many other poisons that you can name or can't name. Do you want to try?" She was a pill master. If she didn't have some random poison on her, she would be embarrassed to call herself a pill master, all right? Second Judicial Magistrate's face twitched as his breathing quickened. His face was green, red and black. "Palace Lord." The reversal of the situation made First Judicial Magistrate smile. She crawled a few steps forward and cupped her hands towards Ling Long Palace Lord. "The 4 new female disciples died because of the poison scripture grass. Since Miss Ye's innocence has been confirmed, the murderer must be someone else." She pointed to Second Judicial Magistrate. After the news was released, Second Judicial Magistrate had been insisting that Miss Yi was the murderer who poisoned the female disciples. "I feel that Second Judicial Magistrate and Guardian Fan are trying to frame Miss Yi, so I suggest that Su Xiao also check Second Judicial Magistrate and Guardian Fan." "Nonsense." Second Judicial Magistrate stared at First Judicial Magistrate in anger. "How could this elder poison my own disciple? Whether it's you or not, we'll know after the inspection." The Great Justice snorted. "Fine, I'll check." The second judge glared angrily at Su Xiao. "You check? Make him sincerely convinced." Su Xiao looked at the Ling Long Palace Master. The Palace Master of the Ling Long Palace nodded. He stood up and walked towards the Second Judicial Elder. "Second Judicial Elder, please excuse me." Su Xiao stretched out his hand towards the Second Judicial Officer. Suddenly, a cry of surprise rang out from the crowd. "Guardian Fan! Protector Fan is dead." What's going on? How did Guard Fan die? The female guards kneeling on the ground looked at Protector Fan, who had suddenly fallen, and let out panicked cries. Poison. She took poison. Poison meridian grass. After Nurse Fan fell to the ground, she slowly saw a patch of purplish-black color spread over her face. Just like the 4 female disciples who had died earlier. Protector Fan's death shocked everyone. Su Xiao immediately walked towards Guard Fan and felt her pulse. After a while she shook her head at Linglong Palace Lord. Guard Fan consumed the poison scripture grass and died from the poison. The poison scripture grass was found on her fingers. This was because Su Xiao wanted to check her and Second Judicial Magistrate. Chapter 4130. Second Judicial Officer had quick reflexes. After realizing this point, she immediately changed her expression as she looked at Guardian Fan's corpse in astonishment. It's her. She poisoned those 4 female disciples. Second Judicial Officer panted heavily as her hands trembled as she pointed at Guardian Fan before her eyes widened as she looked at Third Judicial Officer. We were all cheated. The tripartite judicial system was also stunned by the sudden change in the scene before them. After hearing what Second Judicial Officer said, only then did she come back to her senses. She immediately kowtowed to Linglong Palace Lord. Palace Lord, it's Guardian Fan. Guardian Fan made use of us. Everyone was taken aback when they heard this. Looking at the 2 judicial officers kneeling on the ground and then at Guardian Fan's corpse. It seemed right from the start, it was indeed Guardian Fan who swore that she saw Yiqing Luo bullying the female disciples. Then she specially looked for the judicial elder to stop Yiqing Luo. But she coincidentally saw the scene of the female disciples collapsing at Yiqing Luo's feet. From then on, they all felt that the murderer was Yiqing Luo. So, from the start to the end, it was all Guardian Fan's doing? She herself poisoned the female disciples and shifted the blame to Yiqing Luo? In this way everything could be explained clearly. Linglong Palace Lord looked quietly at the 2 people kneeling on the ground. Her expression was indifferent. He really couldn't tell what she was thinking in her heart. Linglong Palace Lord remained silent. Second Judicial Officer and Third Judicial Officer were feeling apprehensive. Linglong Palace Lord remained silent. The others in the main hall didn't dare to speak either. The atmosphere was so strange that it started to fill the air. It was so oppressive that everyone felt suffocated. Then the Linglong Palace's palace master's finger lightly tapped on the table. A soft dong sound was heard. Like a bell, it fell on everyone's heart. Usually your thoughts are deeper than the other. The palace master of the Linglong Palace chuckled and a sharp light flashed in her eyes. A mere palace master is able to play you all around. This makes this palace master have no choice but to reconsider whether you all have the ability to take on such an important role as justice. Linglong Palace Lord's words were spoken very softly. But it was a tone that could not be refuted. When the second judicial judge and the third judicial judge heard this, they were so shocked that they felt as if a boulder was pounding on their chests. Their fingers curled up and their bodies tensed up. Palace Master, we are only concerned about the Linglong Palace and the chaos. After this lesson we definitely won't do it again next time. As they spoke, the 2 of them kowtowed to the ground. Ever since Yiqing Luo arrived at Linglong Palace, the Linglong Palace Lord's attitude was obviously not right. From the very beginning they had a feeling. The Linglong Palace's palace master seemed to want to make a move on them, the main hall's hall masters. However, a guess was just a guess. Hearing the palace master of the Linglong Palace mention that they would be considering their positions, it was a completely different feeling. They had spent most of their lives in the Linglong Palace. If they were to be stripped of their judicial positions now, what face would they have left to remain in the Linglong Palace Hall? Linglong Palace Lord's gaze unnoticeably shot a glance at Yiqing Luo as she spoke calmly. The person whom you need to apologize to is not me. Second Judicial Officer's body stiffened as he abruptly looked towards Yiqing Luo. In the depths of his eyes, a hurricane was surging. Chapter 4131. On the other hand, Third Judicial Magistrate immediately put on a smile and turned her kneeling position towards Yiqing Luo. Miss Yi, I'm old and muddled, believing in Guardian Fan's nonsense, so I misunderstood you. Her voice trembled slightly and her tone was apologetic at the right time. She knew when to yield and when to stand tall. Third Judicial Magistrate's apology made Second Judicial Magistrate's expression stiffen. Asking her to apologize to a stinky lass who was still wet behind the ears? How could she possibly do it? Second Judicial Magistrate's entire being was resisting to apologize to Yiqing Luo. But when she raised her head and wanted to express her grievances to Linglong Palace Lord. But she met with Linglong Palace Lord's sharp gaze. That heavy gaze made Second Judicial Magistrate's heart tighten. His pupils dilated unconsciously. Finally, under the humiliation and unwillingness, she slowly moved her direction and knelt towards Yiqing Luo. Only before she could squeeze out an apology from the slits of her teeth. Yiqing Luo's lips curled upwards as she gave a lazy smile. There's no need to apologize. Second Judicial Magistrate swallowed back the words that were about to come out of her mouth as she silently thought. At least she had some eyesight. She knew that she couldn't accept her apology. This thought had just flashed past her mind. She heard the young lady's next sentence, which was mixed with a clear and melodious laughter. Apologies against one's conscience, I've heard too many of them and it's scary. I don't want to face 10 overkillers when I wake up at night. She put on a posture as she patted her chest. As for me, I'm just a weak young lady and I'm very timid, so I'll be afraid. Second Judicial Magistrate's face instantly turned gloomy upon hearing Yiqing Luo's words. Her body stiffened as her eyes stared unblinkingly at Yiqing Luo. The bottom of her eyes was filled with viciousness. Miss Yi, how could this be an apology against one's conscience? Third Judicial Magistrate's amiable voice was heard as she leaned forward and bumped into Second Judicial Magistrate imperceptibly, reminding her. Immediately after, he looked at Yiqing Luo with an amiable smile. This matter is indeed my and Second Judicial Officer's fault. We are also sincerely apologizing. We should not just listen to what we see on the surface and make arbitrary judgments. This matter has also taught us a heavy lesson. If Miss Ye's anger cannot be appeased, we are willing to accept punishment as our apology to you, and the tuition fees for this training. The third judicial judge's words were very beautiful. His feelings were deep and sincere. It sounded like a sincere apology. He also made it clear that he was wrong. It also showed that through this lesson he had reflected on it and would definitely correct himself. In that case, this was also a hint to the palace master of the Linglong Palace not to give up their positions so easily. Yiqing Luo's lips curled upwards, her eyes were extremely clear. He was not affected by the words of the third judicial judge at all. She still held her chin lazily, raised her slender eyebrows and looked at them with a faint smile. That look. It was obvious mockery. The second justice was already filled with resentment. After seeing Yiqing Luo's expression, he was even more unresigned. Yiqing Luo, why must you be so overbearing? We've already apologized, what more do you want? She was extremely infuriated as she shouted harshly. This sharp shout. Instantly it caused all movement around to quiet down. The third judicial judge's smiling face froze. She really wanted to kick this pig-like teammate to death. Chapter 4132. Actual harm? Yiqing Luo couldn't help but burst out laughing. Bringing me to Linglong Palace Hall without any explanation, and then your mysterious fairy came looking for trouble and then inexplicably framing me. Her long and narrow eyes rose slightly, forming an arc with a layer of coldness. I am after all a 15-year-old young lady. The trauma to my heart is greater than anything else. The second judicial officer trembled in anger when she heard this obvious nonsense. If Yiqing Luo's heart was hurt, she wouldn't believe it even if she was beaten to death. Even if her heart was hurt, Yiqing Luo wouldn't feel any trauma at all. The second judicial officer was speechless. The third judicial officer lowered her head as her eyes sunk slightly. A cold glint flashed across his covered eyes. How could she not hear it? Yiqing Luo's words were intentionally conveying her grievance to the Lord of Linglong Palace Hall. Grievance? When had Yiqing Luo ever been wronged? If it wasn't for Yiqing Luo who took the initiative to follow the judicial officer to Linglong Palace Hall. Based on Yiqing Luo's character, who could bring her to Linglong Palace Hall? This was also why. Since Yiqing Luo arrived at Linglong Palace Hall yesterday, she was arranged to stay next to the judicial courtyard, and the judicial officer would occasionally go over to Yiqing Luo. Moreover, yesterday Wu Fu Air came looking for trouble. Wasn't she carried down in the end? And Yiqing Luo didn't receive any punishment. Instead it was Wu Fu Air who almost lost her life. and even implicated Hall Master Wu Yan to be punished. Today the so-called framing Yiqing Luo was an outsider right from the start. She was in a state of watching a show from the start, completely sure that she was safe and sound. She had the cheek to say that she was wronged. The ones who were wronged were them, right? But no matter how turbulent the third judicial officer's heart was, they were unable to calm down. At this moment they didn't open their mouths to express any feelings. Missy. Suddenly, the Lord of Linglong Palace Hall opened her mouth slowly. Her voice was deep and cold without any ripples. Yiqing Luo raised her brows as she looked at the Lord of Linglong Palace Hall. It seems that Miss Yi has a lot of complaints about the Linglong Palace, said the Linglong Palace Lord in a very calm voice. Yiqing Luo raised her eyebrows as she raised her teacup and took a sip. After the Linglong Palace Master asked that question, the entire hall was dead silent. Yiqing Luo lifted the cup and the sound of the teacups colliding against each other was extremely clear. Everyone couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. It was until Yiqing Luo placed the teacup down when she met Linglong Palace Lord's gaze with a smile. That's right, there are a lot of complaints. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. In front of the master. Even if he had complaints in his heart he couldn't say it out loud. Everyone looked at the Linglong Palace Lord with trepidation, fearing that the Linglong Palace Lord would fly into a rage. Unexpectedly, the Linglong Palace Lord laughed in a low voice. The smile on her face, which she pretended to be old and mature, actually showed a little bit of her beauty. Since that is the case, this palace master will have to take responsibility for it, said the Linglong Palace Master with a light smile. Just as she finished speaking, her gaze suddenly changed. She coldly swept her gaze over the people kneeling in front of her. As members of the judiciary, you listened to slanderous rumors and injured others without any evidence. Furthermore, you have no intention of repenting. Chapter 4133. Second Judicial Officer's eyes were filled with shock as she looked at Linglong Palace Lord in disbelief. She opened her mouth wide as she couldn't believe what she had heard. However, the Linglong Palace's palace master's ice-cold expression and frost-like gaze that landed on her body caused the doubts and unwillingness in her heart to become stuck in her throat. It was like that icy cold gaze grabbed her by the throat, making her unable to say a single word. Linglong Palace Lord's icy cold gaze slowly shifted onto the third judicial officer. That serene gaze made the third judicial officer tremble as her entire body tensed up as she knelt straight. Linglong Palace Lord stared at the third judicial officer as she spoke in a deep voice. Third judicial officer, on account that you have a good attitude in admitting your mistake, you shall face the wall and reflect on your mistakes. After you have thought it through, come see me again. The third judicial officer's eyes were filled with gratitude as she immediately knelt down as her forehead pressed against the ground. Her voice was trembling as she replied in ecstasy, "Thank you, Palace Lord." Following that, she shifted towards Yiqing Luo's direction. "Thank you, Miss Yi." After thanking Yiqing Luo, she slowly raised her head as she was filled with gratitude as she used a sonorous and forceful voice to speak. "I am willing to go to Linglong Palace Hall to copy Buddhist scriptures, to wash away my vicious aura and also to pray for Palace Lord and Miss Yi." Third Judicial Officer's sincere and serious words. Compared to the shock and astonishment on the second Judicial Officer's face, as well as that venomous gaze towards Yiqing Luo, it formed a sharp contrast. After the third judicial officer expressed her attitude, Linglong Palace Lord's red lips curled slightly as she looked at Yiqing Luo. "Miss Yi, feel that what I have done is considered as being responsible for you." Since Linglong Palace Lord opened her mouth, Yiqing Luo crossed her arms as she leaned against the back of the chair lazily. Her long and narrow eyes squinted slightly as her brows exuded a bewitching look. Especially now, when she heard Linglong Palace Lord's question, she slightly turned her eyes sideways. That exquisite side profile made one's heart palpitate. But that palpitate revealed a kind of nervousness which made their hearts tighten abruptly. Yiqing Luo lazily lifted her eyelids as her lips curled upwards slightly as she looked at Linglong Palace Lord with a smile which didn't look like a smile. If Palace Lord feels that this is considered, then so be it. She naturally understood the reason behind the Linglong Palace Master's actions. Although the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace seemed to be helping her on the surface. But in the end she was the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace. Compared to an outsider like her, The disciples of the Ling Long Palace were the ones that the Ling Long Palace master wanted to protect. In order to give her an explanation. And to protect the disciples of the Ling Long Palace. The palace master of the Ling Long Palace had purposely taken the initiative to propose the punishment for the two judges. Moreover, the punishment was neither light nor heavy. In any case, he had spared their lives. Even though the Ling Long Palace's palace master had made it sound so serious, the truth was that she had managed to protect those two's judicial positions. The moment the Ling Long Palace master opened her mouth, she even mentioned the punishment. From Yiqing Luo's standpoint, she should be filled with gratitude, thanking the Ling Long Palace Lord for being willing to step forward to settle this matter. Then he agreed to Ling Long Palace Master's punishment. In this way, everything that the second and third judicial authorities had done to her was written off. Both of their positions were saved. This was a good plan. But the Ling Long Palace Master had calculated wrongly. Yiqing Luo wasn't someone who would follow the steps and walk down. If she agreed to it this time, it would only make the Ling Long Palace feel that she was easy to talk to, easy to bully. Chapter 41-34. Yiqing Luo wasn't in the mood to tangle with the people from Ling Long Palace. Especially when the Ling Long Palace Lord mentioned half a month's time to reflect on her mistakes. It was pure nonsense. Half a month later, she would no longer be in Ling Long Palace. Whether the second judicial officer had any repentance or not, wasn't it all up to Ling Long Palace Lord? But this was after all the punishment which the Ling Long Palace Lord had personally set. If she were to reject it hastily, it would only cause the Ling Long Palace Lord to be unhappy with her. In other people's territory, it was better to be more obedient. Therefore, her answer was already very implicit. She gave the Ling Long Palace Lord some face and also hinted that even if she agreed to the suggestion which the Ling Long Palace Lord suggested, it was because she was unwilling. As expected, after hearing Yiqing Luo's reply, the Ling Long Palace Lord's expression sunk slightly. Her lips curled into a smile as her legs slumped down. Then, based on Miss Ye's opinion, what should we do? Almost every single word was spat out from the Ling Long Palace Lord with a tone of gnashing her teeth. Her entire face was almost covered with a patch of black. As long as Miss Yi can forgive our disrespectful actions, I am willing to accept any punishment. The third judicial officer spoke out at the same time. His tone was filled with sincerity and determination. One of them was suppressing his anger. Another was apologizing sincerely. No matter how they looked at it, they felt that Yiqing Luo really didn't know what was good for her. The surrounding female disciples' hearts were about to jump out of their throats. This was the first time they had seen such an arrogant and daring person in their entire lives. To everyone, the punishment which the Ling Long Palace Lord had suggested was already very heavy. This was totally because she cared about Yiqing Luo, hence she punished the two judicial officers in this way. But not only did Yiqing Luo not accept the Ling Long Palace Lord's good intentions, she even put on a reluctant expression. Could it be that their third judicial officers weren't humble enough? Could it be that Yiqing Luo wanted all the disciples of Ling Long Palace to kneel down in front of her to plead for mercy? Everyone's gaze towards Yiqing Luo was filled with disgust and displeasure. The surrounding people's emotions. Yiqing Luo naturally felt it. But she didn't even have any reaction when the Ling Long Palace Lord's expression changed. Not to mention caring about those people's emotions. Yiqing Luo touched her smooth and exquisite chin as her pink lips slowly curled upwards. He looked at the three judges with a faint smile. This third judicial judge was truly a talent. He knew when to yield and when to stand tall. He completely cooperated with the Ling Long Palace Master. His attitude of admitting his mistake was sincere. He took the initiative to invite them to the ancestral hall and even copied Buddhist scriptures. As the person involved, she was almost touched by the sincere apology of the three judicial authorities. Since Ling Long Palace's hall master has personally come forward, I naturally follow the host's wishes as a guest. Yiqing Luo replied with a smile as her face was filled with an indifferent smile. The Ling Long Palace master's face sank. Yiqing Luo's voice rang once again, but I have another matter which I need to trouble Ling Long Palace Lord with. Why would Miss Yi bother the Ling Long Palace? The Ling Long Palace master smiled coldly. Facing the Ling Long Palace master's ridiculing tone, Yiqing Luo's expression didn't change. I just arrived at the Ling Long Palace yesterday and don't know Protector Fan at all. She can't possibly frame me for no reason and even want my life. If you say there's no one else behind this, I don't believe it." When Yiqing Luo's words were clearly transmitted into everyone's ears, instantly it set off a raging wave, like a huge rock, smashing into a calm lake. Chapter 4135. You're arrogant and domineering, arrogant and egotistical. Framing is because Guardian Fan can't stand you. Second Judicial Judge blamed Yiqing Luo for his punishment. The moment he said it, it was a sharp ridicule. Yiqing Luo couldn't help but burst out laughing. Her long and narrow eyes were curved upwards. "So, you Linglong Palace Hall can't stand someone, so you want to frame the other party? Hey, I really feel bitterly disappointed for those disciples who were wronged by you. You're spouting nonsense." Second Judicial Judge's face flushed red as he was infuriated, but he couldn't refute Yiqing Luo at all. Yiqing Luo blinked innocently. "What's the matter, Second Judicial Judge? I'm just following what you said and deduced. Is there anything wrong with that?" Second Judicial Judge's chest heaved up and down as he clenched his fists. "Yiqing Luo, you..." "Shut up." Linglong Palace Lord's sleeves moved. A gust of wind swept towards Second Judicial Judge's face. Second Judicial Judge cried out miserably as he was sent flying by that gust of wind and fell heavily onto the ground. "Since Second Judicial Judge refuses to accept my punishment, then, from today onwards, Second Judicial Judge will be stripped of his judicial position." Linglong Palace Lord was obviously angry as his tone was filled with chilliness. Second Judicial Judge spat out blood as his throat was filled with a fishy sweetness, without any energy to speak. Linglong Palace Lord restrained his emotions and looked towards Yiqing Luo as he said word by word, "Miss Ye's request, I will try my best to do it. I will personally investigate this matter. Are you satisfied with this, Miss Yi?" Yiqing Luo's long and narrow eyes rose as she smiled. "Since Palace Lord is so reasonable, I can rest assured. Then I'll have to trouble Palace Lord." Linglong Palace Lord flicked his sleeves as he turned around and left the main hall. Before he left, his cold gaze swept past the two judicial judges who were kneeling on the ground. His expression was as cold as ice. The next moment he flicked his sleeves again and left without turning back. Second Judicial Judge seemed to have lost all his energy as he staggered and fell onto the ground. A big mouthful of blood flowed down her chin and onto her robe. Her eyes were wide open, unable to recover from the huge change. The third judicial judge glanced at the second judicial judge and slowly stood up from the ground. She cupped her fists towards Yiqing Luo and left the main hall. Everyone present was silent for a while. He was still unable to recover from the shock just now. Did the temple master directly remove the second judicial officer from his position? The current second judicial system was no longer the second judicial system? There was a portion of them who were even more curious towards Yiqing Luo. It was rumored that this young lady named Yiqing Luo was the murderer who killed Ling Long Palace's mysterious maiden. This trip to Ling Long Palace was to investigate the truth behind Yiqing Luo killing Ling Long Palace's profound maiden. Why would the temple master be so fearful of her? Yes, it was fear. In everyone's eyes, the palace master was an extremely cold woman. There was basically nothing that could affect her emotions. But, in front of Yiqing Luo, the palace master had given in repeatedly. He had also agreed to Yiqing Luo's requests several times. What on earth was going on? Because of the Linglong Palace master's attitude, everyone's attitude towards Yiqing Luo had an earth-shattering change. Chapter 4136. The minute this sentence was said, those female guards who were originally searching Yiqing Luo's body for the poisonous scripture grass, they changed their direction and swarmed towards the second judicial magistrate. They lifted her up and swiftly walked out of the main hall. The second judicial magistrate was first stunned, and when she was lifted up by a few female guards, she immediately started cursing out in embarrassment. But her mouth was directly gagged. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she watched the second judicial magistrate's figure disappear before she slowly retracted her gaze. She ignored the surrounding people, casting various gazes at her. She directly walked back to her own room. Towards the Lord of Ling Long Palace's attitude towards her, Yiqing Luo was more or less surprised. She didn't know if it was because she was afraid of her overlord's woman title, or there was some other motive. But regarding the Lord of Linglong Palace's punishment towards those two judicial magistrates. Yiqing Luo actually didn't put it to heart. Because these two judicial magistrates had at least 20 years of online experience in Linglong Palace. And also had a portion of their own power. The Lord of Linglong Palace would absolutely not break the balance of Linglong Palace because of her. The punishment now was merely a superficial act, putting on a show for her. Perhaps tomorrow, that second judicial magistrate would come knocking on her door and apologize again. Following that, the Lord of Linglong Palace would say something else. This matter would then be left unsettled. Otherwise, the Lord of Linglong Palace wouldn't have said that it was only to let the second judicial magistrate reflect for half a month. If it wasn't for the fact that the second judicial magistrate's actions were a slap on the Lord of Linglong Palace's face, the Lord of Linglong Palace wouldn't be so angry at the end. Yiqing Luo just pushed the door and entered the room. The expression on her face had some subtle changes. She silently turned around and closed the door. Following that, she walked into the inner room with light footsteps. As expected, a slender figure stood in the middle of the inner room. That man was dressed in a black robe, covering his entire body. Hearing footsteps, that man turned around and the black eyes under the black robe stared at Yiqing Luo. "What are you here for again?" Yiqing Luo walked forward, past that man and sat on a chair by the side. That person stared at Yiqing Luo for a long time. His voice was deep. "I want to see you." Yiqing Luo's hand, which was holding the teacup, shook a little. "Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace, are you too bored because you have nothing better to do?" She simply put down the teacup and looked at that person with a faint smile. "Logically speaking, your Palace of Darkness is not having an easy time now. Are you really that free to come to Linglong Palace so many times?" She paused for a moment, then lifted her elbow and supported her chin. She giggled. "Or should I say, Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace, your mission is in this Linglong Hall, right?" "Master doesn't know that I'm here." The Palace Master of Gloomy Palace shook her head. "I'm just worried about you." "Ha." Yiqing Luo didn't believe his words. Which one of his actions wasn't inspired by someone else? How could the true mastermind of the Dark Shadow Palace not know his every move? In front of her he was always affectionate, as if he really loved her till the end of time. "Doesn't your teeth ache?" He felt sour all over. "It doesn't matter if you believe me or not, I know very well what I'm doing." The Palace Master of Gloomy Palace saw the ridicule in Yiqing Luo's eyes. He pursed his lips as his voice sounded a little hoarse. The pitch-black eyes under the black robe also had an extremely faint layer of dimness. Chapter 4137. Yiqing Luo couldn't help but laughed. "These words, are they what that person asked you to say?" The Palace Lord of Abyss Palace clenched his fists tightly as his black robe revealed a pair of tranquil black eyes. "I'm serious. If you continue to stay in Linglong Palace, I'm afraid you will not be able to leave this place in future." Yiqing Luo raised her brows. "How do you know?" "I know you don't believe me." He laughed bitterly. "But have you ever thought about why you've been in Linglong Palace for 1 day and 1 night? Your brothers and Overlord still haven't rushed over to Linglong Palace." When he mentioned the two words Overlord, he was obviously conflicted. Yiqing Luo's eyes flickered slightly as she maintained a calm expression. "What do you mean?" "The surroundings of Linglong Palace has already set up an enchantment. Even if your brothers knew that you've been brought away by Linglong Palace's judicial officer, they wouldn't be able to find you." Speaking of this, his tone was filled with unwillingness, but he had no choice but to continue. "Based on the Overlord's ability, if he knew that you've disappeared after going to Linglong Palace, he would definitely disregard everything to find you. But he still hasn't appeared. Haven't you thought about these problems?" Yiqing Luo remained silent. She had naturally thought about these problems before, but she didn't think about it in detail. With the Profound Phoenix Ring and Profound Dragon Ring's connection, it shouldn't be difficult for Zhou Xian to find her. Unless the mastermind of Palace of Abyss had interfered. This thought flashed past her mind, and Yiqing Luo's pupils suddenly contracted as she stared at the man in front of her. Palace of Abyss collaborated with Linglong Palace? She asked this question out loud. But Yiqing Luo still felt that something was amiss. If Linglong Palace really collaborated with Palace of Abyss, why was it that she couldn't sense any evil qi in Linglong Palace? No matter if it was the second judicial officer or the third judicial officer, There wasn't any remnant of the evil qi on them. Oh. He only spat out 2 words, and without any other explanation he urged again, "Believe me this once and leave Linglong Palace now. I don't want you to get hurt again." Towards his denial, Yiqing Luo was still suspicious. To tell the truth, she had guessed right from the start that there was some special connection between Linglong Palace and Palace of Abyss. The Chief Justice of the Linglong Palace brought her to the Linglong Palace. Yiqing Luo had been guessing that it was possible that Secluded Palace was making use of Linglong Hall to delay her time. But now, the Palace Master of the Secluded Darkness Palace wanted her to leave the Linglong Palace immediately. This was a little thought-provoking. Yiqing Luo remained silent for a moment, as her pink lips pursed slightly, and an extremely faint smile surfaced. "You said Linglong Palace will be in danger, and it has nothing to do with Secluded Darkness Palace. Then, you should at least tell me, what danger does this Linglong Palace have?" The Palace Master of Secluded Darkness Palace did not reply immediately. He lowered his head in silence. The black robe on his head covered his entire face. His entire body exuded an aura of conflict and struggle. Yiqing Luo didn't rush him. The 2 of them remained silent. After a long time, only then did he slowly move. He raised his head and said, "The Palace Master of the Linglong Palace wants to groom you to be the next Palace Master of the Linglong Palace." After he said that, Yiqing Luo was stunned, while the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace was silent. She had imagined countless of possibilities in her mind, but she had never thought that it would be this point. Groom her to become the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace? Chapter 4138. She had just arrived at the Linglong Palace Hall and she had already caused a huge commotion. She will be the Hall Master? Aren't you afraid that the Linglong Palace Hall will collapse? The Palace Master of the Linglong Palace has taken a liking to you, and she has also taken a liking to the person behind you. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace pursed his lips, and his voice was a little hoarse. "Otherwise, why do you think she would tolerate you so much? She's just trying to lower your guard against her." He paused for a moment before continuing. "Do you know why the Linglong Palace was able to take root in the Earth domain for the past few hundred years?" Yiqing Luo shook her head. "Don't know. The Linglong Palace is not as miraculous as the people in the land make it out to be. It is also not as the people in the land think, where it represents justice and protects the peace of the land." He lowered his head and said in a low voice, "The existence of the Linglong Palace is nothing more than a place that specializes in finding a body that can match its power. And you have fulfilled the requirements of the Linglong Palace." This sentence sounded extremely familiar. If I remember correctly, back then, Old Lai had also mentioned the Linglong Palace to her. He had always said that the Linglong Palace was not a good place. Sounded familiar, a place to find a body that matched his strength. Those Empyrean fairies were merely puppets created by the Linglong Palace. However, Old Lai did not elaborate on the specifics. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace explained, "You are now the successor that the Linglong Palace Master has chosen. Your body will become the puppet of the Linglong Palace Master." Puppet? It was this word again. What kind of existence was this Linglong Palace? In any case, Yiqing Luo, leave Linglong Palace first. You must not become Linglong Palace's puppet. He didn't continue speaking as he started to persuade her. In Yiqing Luo's heart, she was still pondering over what he said about the puppet and finding a compatible body. She looked up at him and asked, "How do you know about the Linglong Palace?" The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace sighed. "I heard it from Master." Master? He was the person behind the scenes of the Dark Palace. He was the real culprit who had been plotting against her from behind. "What that person said." Yiqing Luo expressed that she definitely had a motive. "When Master mentioned the Linglong Palace, he didn't know that you were there. He only warned me not to provoke the Linglong Palace." Knowing that Yiqing Luo wouldn't believe his master, he explained. "You don't know? How could that person not know her whereabouts?" Yiqing Luo expressed her disbelief. Moreover, that person did not look like the kind of person who would care about his disciple. It was a strange warning. Were they really afraid that he would provoke the Linglong Palace? Or was he trying to use his mouth to make her go against the Linglong Palace? Yiqing Luo expressed her doubts. "I'm telling the truth. Yiqing Luo, I took the risk of being discovered by Master, taking the risk of letting master know that I already have a disloyal heart, to sneak into the Linglong Palace just because I care about you. I don't want you to become a puppet of the Linglong Palace. Yiqing Luo's suspicion and silence deeply pierced his heart and his eyes. He staggered a step back. His body swayed a little. He raised one hand and pressed it on his chest. He pulled it up forcefully and raised his head. That pair of dark eyes under the black robes stared at her without blinking. Chapter 4139. His voice was filled with sourness, as though he was choking with sobs. Somewhat painful. Yiqing Luo's face was still devoid of emotions. She looked at the man in front of her calmly, listening to his bitter and powerless words. He couldn't blame her for being too cold. But the other party was her enemy's man. He was the disciple of the person who had tried to take her life several times and struck out at her and the people around her. Because of the person behind the scenes in Secluded Palace, her brothers had already suffered too much. She had also almost lost her life several times. If it wasn't for her good luck, if it wasn't for Zhou Xian's protection, she might have let that person get his way long ago. So to let her face this person in front of her, the palace lord of Secluded Palace on the surface, the disciple of the person behind the scenes. How could she trust her? Even if he was sincere. He was sincere, not wanting her to get hurt and taking such a huge risk to specially tell her all of this. Who could guarantee that this wasn't that person's scheme? It wasn't that she was panicking, but that person's temper was just so despicable. He had to guard against him. You still don't believe me? The young lady's silence broke his last persistence. He burst out laughing. His body staggered backwards several steps. As he laughed, his voice turned hoarse and astringent. If it was any other lady, perhaps she would be feeling heartache and guilt now. Yiqing Luo's gaze didn't change at all as she spoke calmly. You also said that the Linglong Palace's surroundings have already formed an enchantment barrier. Even if I want to leave, there's no way, isn't it? I can bring you away. The palace lord of Secluded Palace suddenly raised his head as his tone was filled with joy. He took quick steps towards Yiqing Luo as he stretched out his hand in an attempt to hold her arm. Leave with me. I can bring you out. Yiqing Luo tilted her body slightly as she avoided his outstretched hand. The palace lord of Secluded Palace was stunned as he stared at his empty hand and slowly retracted it. His fingers tightened as his excitement and joy seemed as though it was just an illusion earlier. Yiqing Luo looked at the man whose head was hung low as she gave a low laugh. In her laughter there were hints of ridicule. Palace lord of Secluded Darkness. Since you can enter and exit Linglong Hall freely, then Xian can too, isn't that so? The body of the palace master of the Netherworld Palace suddenly stiffened. Yiqing Luo's laughter was still ringing in his ears. Thank you for your concern, I appreciate your intention, but I still want to wait for Xian to pick me up. Everyone knew that she had followed the Grand Judge to the Linglong Palace. If she left with the palace master of Secluded Darkness Palace, who knew? After leaving the Linglong Palace, would the person behind the scenes appear? At that time, Zhou Xian would go to the Linglong Palace to look for her. But she was in danger. The eyes of the palace master of the Netherworld Palace dimmed. His face, which was hidden under the black robe, was pitch black. He clenched his fists. Suddenly, his backhand swiftly grabbed towards Yiqing Luo's wrist. His voice was a little anxious. Every moment you stay in the Linglong Palace is dangerous. I can't see you in danger. You don't know how terrifying the Linglong Palace is and don't know what kind of puppet you will become after you become the palace master of the Linglong Palace. I must bring you away. His actions were fast and accurate. Adding on to the fact that it was sudden, Yiqing Luo wasn't able to evade in time. Her wrist was locked tightly in his palm. She frowned in pain as she tried to struggle. Chapter 4140. Bam! The sound of the room door being smashed open was heard. The wooden boards shattered and fell onto the ground. Trying to leave? A lady's stern voice was heard from the door. Immediately following that, Linglong Palace Lord brought along 2 judicial officers as she rushed into the room. And outside the room, there were at least a few hundred female disciples. The current Linglong Palace Lord's expression was gloomy as she stared deadly at the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace. Third judicial officer's usual amiable face was now covered with a solemn expression. Her gaze swept past the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace and subsequently fell onto Yiqing Luo. There was an obvious ridicule in her eyes. But very quickly it was replaced by anger. Is Linglong Palace a place where you can come and go as you please? Outside the room, there were orderly footsteps as the shadows covered the sky and earth. Yiqing Luo looked through the broken door and saw a huge crowd outside the door. Thinking about it, Linglong Palace's disciples had all gathered over here. The palace lord of the Linglong Palace Hall had made up his mind to make her stay. Yiqing Luo's lips curled slightly as her narrow eyes squinted as she withdrew her hand from the palace lord of Secluded Darkness Palace's hand. Linglong Palace Lord and the rest suddenly barged into the room. And they were aggressive. Yiqing Luo withdrew her hand and broke free from his restraints. Yiqing Luo swung her hand and raised her slender brows as she looked at Linglong Palace Lord with a smile which didn't look like a smile. Palace Lord, what do you mean? Yiqing Luo, do you treat all of us as fools? The Grand Judicial Officer's face sunk as he shouted furiously. Since you arrived at Linglong Palace yesterday, you've been meeting him privately. Do you really think that we don't know anything? The Grand Judicial Officer pointed at the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace. Following that, he sneered, "This person is not the Overlord. You're planning to do some shady business with this man in Linglong Palace behind the Overlord's back." These words sounded like they were filled with a sense of indignation and indignation. Yiqing Luo guessed that this Grand Judicial Officer might have been hurt in the past. Yiqing Luo glanced sideways at the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace and then looked at Linglong Palace Lord. The eyes of the Linglong Palace Lord were still fixed on the Palace Lord of the Secluded Darkness Palace. She let out a low chuckle that contained the sweetness and laziness of a young girl. Perhaps you don't know who this person is, but the Palace Master should know who this person is. The topic shifted to the Hall Master. The first judicial judge and the third judicial judge's gaze immediately shifted to the Linglong Palace Master. I didn't expect that the person who had been following Miss Yi would be you. The Linglong Palace Master did not deny it. Her face was cold, but a cold smile appeared on her face. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace obviously did not expect that the people from the Linglong Palace would discover his existence. Coincidentally, he was stopped in his tracks. His face under the black robe was somewhat gloomy. He speedily stood in front of Yiqing Luo and his tall and slender figure completely hid Yiqing Luo behind him. When he got close to Yiqing Luo, he whispered, "I'm sorry." Then he turned to look at the Linglong Palace's Hall Master and emitted a sinister cold aura. His actions made the Linglong Palace Master laugh. She raised her hand and covered half of her red lips as she laughed softly. "Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace, if I didn't investigate wrongly, you and Miss Yi should have a hostile relationship. Now, putting on a protective stance and standing in front of Miss Yi, don't tell me you've betrayed the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace?" Chapter 41-41. Secluded Palace Lord's body stiffened slightly. It was obvious that the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace knew him and knew his identity, as well as some matters regarding the gloomy palace. But the eyes under the black robe flickered slightly when it met with Linglong Palace Lord's. But he still didn't move away. Like a towering mountain, he blocked Yiqing Luo's way. Secluded Palace Lord? Third Judicial Officer opened his mouth in astonishment as he sized up the man in black robe. In the depths of his eyes, there was a strange glint darting about. Linglong Palace Lord's red lips curled as she said word by word. "On account that you're the Palace Lord of Secluded Palace, if you leave now, I can let you off. But, Miss Yi, you absolutely cannot leave Linglong Palace Lord." Secluded Palace Lord's voice was gloomy and cold as black chi revolved around him. "If we leave, we can only leave together." "Ahaha. Palace Lord of Secluded Palace, have you forgotten that the lady you're protecting behind already has the Overlord? You're risking your life for her. Will she be touched because of this?" Linglong Palace Lord's eyes were slightly cold as his vision slowly shifted onto Yiqing Luo. Secluded Palace Lord's body tensed up as he glanced sideways at the young lady behind him. He stretched out his hand towards her. "I'll bring you away." The hand under the black robe was long and slender with a thick callus on it. When it stretched out towards Yiqing Luo, it was slightly trembling. Yiqing Luo slowly raised her hand. His head immediately lifted up. Apparently because Yiqing Luo took the initiative to stretch out her hand, he became excited. If his head wasn't covered by the black robe, she would probably be able to see his pair of glowing eyes. But Yiqing Luo didn't place her hand on his hand, but it moved upwards. She put her hand on his arm. Gently she pushed it aside. The young lady's lips curled into a faint smile. Her long and narrow eyes were curved as a hint of ridicule was outlined in her eyes. "No need, we can't leave." She laughed lightly as there wasn't much worry in her tone. The palace master of the Netherworld Palace looked at his hand that was pushed away and stared at it blankly. "As long as you are willing, even if it takes my life, I will send you out safely." "You still don't understand." Yiqing Luo's gaze went past him, meeting Ling Long Palace Lord's gaze. When their eyes met, the energy between the two of them skyrocketed. The girl's red clothes fluttered, and her eyes were full of flirtatious and domineering aura. Even if he was not as old as the Ling Long Palace Lord, in terms of imposing manner, she did not lose out to the Ling Long Palace Master. "What do you mean?" The Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace didn't understand what Yiqing Luo meant. Yiqing Luo lazily raised her lower lip as her expression was extremely sloppy. Her gaze swept over the Ling Long Palace Master and the two judicial officials, and she chuckled. "From the very beginning, the Ling Long Palace Master knew of your existence. If I'm not mistaken, the Palace Master must have mistaken you for Zhou Xian from the very beginning." Yiqing Luo's brows rose as she looked at Ling Long Palace Lord in a languid and teasing manner. "Am I right?" Ling Long Palace Lord didn't say a word. Yiqing Luo continued. "Since yesterday when Wu Fu and Hall Master Wu Yan failed to find trouble and instead suffered a loss, you were already unhappy with me. But because you thought that the person hiding in the dark was the Overlord, so on the surface, you didn't dare to go against me and even followed my suggestions time and time again, right?" Chapter 41-42. Yesterday, the timing when she sensed the presence of the Ling Long Palace Lord was a little too coincidental. According to the Ling Long Palace Lord's words, she said that she had been there ever since Wu Fu found trouble. Before Wu Fu found trouble, the Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace had appeared in her room. So, there was a possibility that the Ling Long Palace Lord knew that there was a second person in her room. So she hid in the dark, wanting to know if the person in the dark was Zhou Xian. But unexpectedly, before the person in the dark appeared. However, when Wu Fu came looking for trouble for no reason, she beat him up and almost lost her life. As the Ling Long Palace Lord, she had no choice but to show herself. After that, she arranged for her to stay in the room next to the judicial courtyard. Wasn't it to confirm who the person hiding in the dark was? "So what if you know?" The Ling Long Palace Lord didn't refute but smiled faintly. "Since you've confirmed that the Overlord is not by your side and everything has been seen through by you, then there's no need to continue this show." "Finally going to reveal your true face?" Yiqing Luo wasn't shocked or flustered at all, only smiling at the Ling Long Palace Lord. "It looks like you already know the reason why I left you in the Ling Long Palace." The Ling Long Palace Lord sneered. Yiqing Luo touched her chin. "I'm very curious, why me?" "Because your body is just suitable." A trace of madness flashed past the Ling Long Palace Lord's eyes. "As long as you take over this Palace Lord's position, this Palace Lord will be free." When she said the last two words, the Ling Long Palace Lord's face was twisted. That was a kind of craziness that she had been chasing for a long time. Yiqing Luo raised her brows. "Body just suitable?" It was indeed as what Old Lai and the Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace said. The Ling Long Palace Lord's target was a compatible body. The Ling Long Palace Lord's motive was really to make her the next Ling Long Palace Lord. Moreover, it seemed that becoming the Ling Long Palace Lord wasn't as glamorous as it seemed on the surface. Freedom. The Ling Long Palace Lord's freedom was restricted? Yiqing Luo, the surrounding area is filled with our Ling Long Palace Lord's men. As long as the Overlord didn't rush over yesterday, he has no way to enter Ling Long Palace Lord to save you. The smile on the face of the Ling Long Palace Master's face deepened. Her tone was sinister as she said, "Accept reality obediently. If you struggle and get hurt, you'll be the one suffering." The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace sneered. "You can try. You can't touch her at all." The Ling Long Palace Master gave him a stern look and warned, "Remember your status. You and her are on opposing sides. This has nothing to do with you." The Palace Master of Gloomy Palace said coldly, "If you want to touch her, ask me first." The Palace Master of the Ling Long Palace did not back down. Her expression became solemn and dignified. She narrowed her eyes and said, The palace master of the Netherworld Palace has decided to become enemies with the Linglong Palace? He raised his head up high as his slender figure stood in front of Yiqing Luo, not moving at all. He used his actions to express his meaning. His expression turned cold as he waved his arm. Since the palace lord of Ethereal Palace wants to show off in front of the beauty, then this palace lord shall fulfill your hero's wish to save the beauty. Outside the door, 10 aggressive female disciples rushed in. Linglong Palace Lord's disciples who were dressed in lotus green robes filled their eyes. Chapter 41-43. Linglong Palace Lord's words had just landed. Those 10 female disciples' aura exploded. Endless profound steps, like a surging wave, covered the surrounding area of 100 miles. Palace Lord's pupils constricted as he grabbed Yiqing Luo's wrist and said worriedly, "Be careful." Just as he stood in front of Yiqing Luo and stretched out his hand, the surrounding dark force exploded with a loud bang. The entire house, under the collision of the profound energy, collapsed onto her with a boom. The surrounding green grass and thick trees were all uprooted. In a split second the earth shook. Everyone was stunned by this extremely destructive scene. Even the person involved, Palace Lord's ears were buzzing as he went into a daze. He stretched out his hand to grab Yiqing Luo but grabbed nothing. Boundless profound energy fell straight down from his back. He was wholeheartedly protecting Yiqing Luo but strangely grabbed the young lady's hand as his eyes frantically searched for the young lady's figure. He had no time to react to this profound energy. It was at this moment. A burst of valiant and overbearing energy blocked his back. It collided fiercely with that oncoming profound energy. Following that, it was the current situation. Palace Lord of Seclusion Palace suddenly turned his head back. As expected, he saw that fiery figure under that sky full of profound energy had an elegant posture faintly discernible. That slender figure just stood in front of him. He wanted to protect her, but instead made her protect him. Palace Lord of Seclusion Palace rejoiced that he was covered in a layer of black robe and no one could see his expression under the black robe. A lady like Yiqing Luo. Why would she need his protection? Wasn't this the reason why he liked Yiqing Luo? The overbearing collision caused everything present to turn into a piece of ruins. Amidst the rising smoke and layers upon layers of ripples from the profound waves, everyone only saw a calm expression, with a hint of laziness in between her brows, quietly standing there. As though earlier that super strong destructive force wasn't caused by her. Trash. Linglong Palace Lord's expression sunk when he saw this, as his gaze swept towards the 2 judicial officers beside him. The first judicial magistrate and third judicial magistrate looked at each other and leaped towards Yiqing Luo. The female disciples of the Linglong Palace also followed closely behind and attacked. Yiqing Luo's gaze didn't change at all as she glanced sideways at the man behind her. "Don't bother about me. If you can leave, then leave first." "How could I leave you behind and go alone?" The Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace regained his senses from the earlier shock as he speedily shifted to Yiqing Luo's side. "I still stand by what I said. If you want to leave, let's leave together. Their target is not you." As Yiqing Luo was saying that, she flipped her hand to receive the incoming attack. The glower flame fan in her hand opened up as boundless profound energy turned into several wind blades, covering the sky and covering the earth as it surged forward. She continued, "Since the Linglong Palace Lord wants me to inherit the position of the next Palace Lord, he will not really do anything to me. I won't leave." The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace gritted his teeth and spat out. He then charged into the crowd in front of him. The profound light exploded and countless profound energies collided with each other. In the entire space, waves after waves of perilous waves were set off. The moment the first judicial magistrate and third judicial magistrate made their move, their target was Yiqing Luo. The 2 of them seemed to have moved at the same time and appeared behind Yiqing Luo. Boundless profound energy surged in the palms of the 2 men. Even Yiqing Luo's surrounding aura started to fluctuate. After the 2 of them exchanged glances, they suddenly struck a palm towards Yiqing Luo. Chapter 41-44. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A deafening explosion sound reverberated through the entire space. In the space, profound waves surged like a monstrous huge wave, wave after wave crazily attacking. Even the sky had turned into an extremely oppressive deep black. The aura crazily intertwined, swallowing Yiqing Luo entirely. Yiqing Luo. This scene made the palace lord's pupils abruptly widen, as he screamed out Yiqing Luo's name hoarsely. He wanted to dash towards the side where the profound energy was surging. But his path was completely blocked by the Linglong Palace's disciples. Get lost. Get lost. The palace lord of the Linglong Palace bellowed furiously. The overbearing energy crazily sent the people who were blocking his way flying. But there were still numerous female disciples who surged forward one after another. Under the black robe, that pair of gloomy and sullen eyes overflowed with large black threads. If he wasn't shrouded in the black robe, then everyone could see. That pair of eyes was like a densely packed spider web with numerous black threads. Those black threads, bit by bit, lingered in his pupils. Endless evil qi overflowed from the palace lord of the Linglong Palace. Pieces after pieces of mist-like evil qi spread out in all directions. Everywhere it went. Those Linglong Palace's female disciples who were flocking towards him all had a huge change in expression. Immediately following that, the expressions on their faces started to turn sinister. One by one they started to tear each other apart, tangling together. She realized that something was wrong with the evil qi which was spreading out. Linglong Palace Lord's expression changed slightly, as she speedily retreated a few steps. She waved her sleeve. A transparent barrier blocked in front of her. It blocked off all the evil energy that was spreading over. But she had avoided the evil qi. But those female disciples who were guarding the surroundings were all affected by the evil qi. Their method of killing each other was extremely vicious. Just a moment later, the entire space was filled with a thick blood stench. Blood also dyed the ground red. This scene made Linglong Palace Lord's expression sunk. She raised her voice and shouted, "Wake up! What do you all look like?" It was so easy for him to be attracted by my mind. However, no one heard her voice. Without these obstacles in the way, he would not be able to stop them. The palace lord of Ethereal Palace immediately rushed towards Yiqing Luo's direction. In the meantime, earlier that wave of boundless energy which had engulfed Yiqing Luo suddenly exploded with an extremely dense and intense aura. Bang! There was a loud noise. A fiery red shadow flashed past in front of his eyes. It was really fiery red. It was like a flame, dazzling and dazzling. That red was blinding for an instant. The surrounding air seemed to become extremely hot as a result. The surging heat and the blazing heat roasted everything around it. The ground was littered with corpses, and the smell of dried meat emanated from them. Many female disciples were affected by the evil Yin energy. Like a wild beast, he opened his mouth and began to tear at his opponent's flesh. It was an extremely bloody and cruel scene. The first judicial judge and the third judicial judge's relaxed faces immediately tensed up. He immediately raised his head and looked in the direction of the fiery red shadow. His entire body instantly froze. It was a gigantic, giant bird that was entirely red in color. Its phoenix feathers were like flames, overflowing with brilliant colors. Between the spread of its wings, there was an extremely dazzling glow. Vermilion bird. Chapter 41-45. And what made the first and third judicial systems shocked was, on the back of the vermilion bird there was a slender figure. In the raging flames, the light and shadow were floating, and it was very obvious. The red dress was like fire, overflowing with beauty. Totally not suppressed by the majesty of the vermilion bird just because it was the same color as the vermilion bird. The first and third judicial systems pupils contracted as they revealed a look of disbelief. The person on the vermilion bird's back was Yiqing Luo. They didn't know much about Yiqing Luo's investigation. Moreover, those bunch of rich wastrels around Muchilon had mentioned it. They only thought that Yiqing Luo had relied on the overlord to get her current reputation. Although the great judicial judge had investigated the details of what had happened at the auction, he was not able to do so. The citizens praised Yiqing Luo so much that she was about to ascend to the heavens. Although she believed the citizens' words that Qiao Yulu wasn't killed by Yiqing Luo. As for those exaggerated words that Yiqing Luo alone dealt with most of the elites in the Earth domain. They treated it as everyone's compliments to the overlord and deliberately spread it out. But they had never heard of it. Yiqing Luo had subdued an ancient sacred beast as her own battle pet. This was an ancient sacred beast. one of the legendary four sacred beasts. It wasn't something that the Overlord could capture personally and give to Yiqing Luo to form a contract successfully. Under the shocked gazes of the two judicial officers, the young lady leaped up, falling from the sky. A sharp gust of wind swept the horrifying profound energy. Her fingertips moved slightly as the glower flame fan opened up. A bright red glow encircled the glower flame fan. It was like a dazzling sharp blade shining with a cold glint. The two judicial officers' eyes widened as their bodies instinctively flipped over and swiftly rolled down the ground. Bam! The profound glow fell down. It blasted the ground open. Gravel kept flying. The two judges narrowly dodged the fatal blow just now. However, when he rolled on the ground, he was stained with blood and flesh that flew everywhere. When they climbed back up, the two of them were in a sorry state. "You! How dare you!" The senior judicial magistrate didn't expect that his and the third judicial magistrate's sneak attack had failed, and instead, they were teased by Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo smiled as she looked at the both of them. Her brows were filled with ridicule. Great magistrate's words are just too ridiculous. You sneak attacked me and I haven't even said that you're despicable. You were just scared by my Qian and you became like this and you still blame me? Yiqing Luo. The Grand Inquisitor's eyes darkened. She clenched her fists and glared at him. I don't want to cross swords with you. I was the one who brought you to Linglong Palace yesterday and I've spent the most time with you. A cold light flashed across her eyes. I don't want to hurt you. Yiqing Luo rolled her eyes and with a flick of her fingertips, the glower flame fan flipped in a few fancy ways in her palm. A coquettish red glow burst forth. Like layers upon layers of ripples, they spread out in all directions. Their speed was extremely slow. The great judicial officer was about to ridicule Yiqing Luo's action. That surging profound energy was closing in on him. It was just a moment's effort. The profound glow was suddenly like a tide, madly slapping the ground. The sudden majestic force suddenly fell on the abdomen of the Grand Inquisitor. The Grand Inquisitor only had time to scream. The whole person flew out. Dong. She fell heavily among the corpses. Thick blood stained her nostrils. Chapter 41-46. What a joke. There wasn't the slightest bit of affection. He still dared to play the emotional card in front of her? Just now, the new female disciple was poisoned. The first judicial division was on her side, preventing the second judicial division and the third judicial division from interfering. However, this was not because of the Grand Magistrate's good intentions towards her. It was just to compete with the second judicial division. And you want to use it as a bargaining chip? Ha, what a joke. The Grand Judge opened his mouth, wanting to refute. However, large mouthfuls of blood gushed out from his mouth. The Grand Judge clutched his chest in pain, his entire body trembling and curling up. Yiqing Luo. The Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace looked at the vermilion bird in the sky and took a look at Yiqing Luo. It was until the flames around Yiqing Luo had subsided before he hurried over to her. He had also retracted the sinister aura emanating from his body. However, the surrounding female disciples didn't stop killing each other with ferocious expressions. Yiqing Luo kept her glower flame fan as she raised her eyes towards the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace and was just about to open her mouth. However, his eyes suddenly widened. She quickly reached out and grabbed the Palace Master of Secluded Darkness Palace. With a jerk of her elbow, Lin Mingya swiftly pulled Lin Mingya behind him. Then her other hand formed a palm chi and slapped towards the back of the Palace Master of Gloomy Palace. Like a tidal wave, the profound light surged out with great momentum. Bang, 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 bang. A few profound waves collided and the sound of explosions was deafening. The entire space seemed to be distorted. The profound waves were filled with layers and layers of ripples that couldn't be smoothed out. This palm had indeed blocked a large amount of dark force in front of him. But, ugh. Surging profound energy, the remnant might vibrated as a strong tail wind slapped onto Yiqing Luo's chest. She felt a fishy taste in her throat and took a few steps back. Behind him was the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace. If she retreated like that, she would definitely fall into the arms of the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace. Yiqing Luo's eyes flashed slightly and with a turn of her feet, she changed her direction. He was already under pressure from the aftershock. His body moved so much. His legs went soft and he fell to the ground. A few streaks of blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. The arms of the Palace of Darkness Lord Zhang froze in mid-air. The eyes under the black robe gazed deeply at Yiqing Luo. Obviously, Yiqing Luo could totally retreat into his arms. Why did he have to forcefully change his direction? Aggravate my internal injuries? It was just a simple touch. She couldn't even stand it. He looked at the pale-faced girl who was half collapsed on the ground. Little by little, he retracted his arms that were suspended in mid-air. As for the palace master of the Netherworld Palace's changes in expression and actions, the palace master of the secluded Darkness Palace was stunned. Yiqing Luo didn't have the time to bother about it, nor did she have the time to care about it. After she steadied herself, she immediately raised her eyes and looked in the direction of the powerful attack. Linglong Palace Lord's expression was icy cold as a pair of gloomy beautiful eyes, like a poisonous snake, wrapped around Yiqing Luo's body. The person who attacked just now was the palace master of Linglong Palace. Seeing that the first and second judicial judges couldn't do anything to her, was he going to take action personally? Yiqing Luo's eyes narrowed as her lips curled into a bloodthirsty arc. Before he could speak, suddenly she heard a sharp voice coming from afar. Yiqing Luo, you didn't expect this, right? You slut, still being complacent. Did you really think that our palace master would take action against me? Following that voice, she saw 4 female disciples carrying a carriage nearing quickly. Chapter 41-47. The entire Linglong Palace Hall was in such a huge commotion. The second judicator naturally felt it. In addition, the maidservant sent by the 3 judicial authorities came to her and told her some simple things in a concise and comprehensive manner. For example, the reason why Linglong Palace Lord gave in to Yiqing Luo was because he suspected that the Overlord was hiding something. For example, Linglong Palace Lord's concession towards Yiqing Luo was because Linglong Palace Lord wanted Yiqing Luo to become the next Palace Lord. For example, everything that the Linglong Palace Lord had done and said earlier was actually not counted. It was merely a show that was put up in front of Yiqing Luo. Hearing this news, the second preceptor's indignant heart finally calmed down. She was also the second in command of the Linglong Palace. Furthermore, it was the high and mighty second judge. However, the second judicial officer couldn't understand. In this Linglong Hall, there were plenty of people who were much more outstanding than Yiqing Luo. Why did they let Yiqing Lu be the next Linglong Palace Lord? Obviously, she was more suitable for the position of Linglong Palace Lord, wasn't she? At this time, the surging dark force aura from the battle outside became even more intense. Once again, he heard those female disciples, who were constantly rushing towards the direction where the profound energy was surging, talking as they ran. The second judicial judge roughly understood. The person hiding behind the scenes was not the Overlord, but the gigolo that Yiqing Luo had secretly raised. After knowing that it wasn't Dizun, Linglong Palace Lord had made a move on Yiqing Luo. It was a mighty group of people. The dark force soared to the sky and shook the entire Linglong Palace. The second judicial judge was excited. She didn't feel that a young lady like Yiqing Luo, along with a gigolo, would be able to deal with so many people from Linglong Palace. Furthermore, the temple master was also present. What kind of waves could a little girl stir up? The second preceptor immediately called the maidservant beside her and carried her to the direction of the battle. As soon as he arrived, from afar they saw Yiqing Luo being thrown onto the ground by the hall master. Yiqing Luo was in a sorry state as she vomited blood. Not long ago, the humiliation he had suffered from Yiqing Luo at this moment had obtained a carefree release. Second, the sudden appearance of justice. Everyone's gaze shifted to the second judicial judge. The Linglong Palace Lord also frowned slightly. Looking at the second preceptor's ferocious and proud smile, he didn't say anything in the end to stop him. Second judicial officer stared at Yiqing Luo venomously as he laughed complacently. Aren't you very arrogant? Continue to stand up and be arrogant? Why are you lying on the ground? She spat fiercely and sneered. You're just a vixen who uses your status as the Overlord to show off. Do you really think you're someone important? If not for Yiqing Luo, she would not lose face in front of the disciples of the Linglong Palace. If not for Yiqing Luo, how could the Linglong Palace Lord be so ruthless towards her? Yiqing Luo. The Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace slowly walked to Yiqing Luo's side as he half squatted down, trying to support her. But it was avoided by Yiqing Luo. She raised her hand and blocked the hand of the palace master of Gloomy Palace. She shook her head at him. I'm fine. I've been rejected again. The palace master of the Netherworld Palace sneered in a low voice. We are just ordinary friends helping each other. Are you going to reject me? I'm really fine. Yiqing Luo took a deep breath and lifted her slender fingers to wipe the blood off the corners of her lips, as she tried to stand up. But this movement. Her chest, which was injured earlier, started to emit an oppressive pain. Her legs turned soft as she staggered and fell onto the ground. Chapter 41-48. Yiqing Luo pursed her pale lips and was about to reply. Second elder saw Yiqing Luo's weak side and laughed heartily. Yiqing Luo, this elder advises you to be obedient. It's your fortune that the hall master has taken a liking to you. Don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. The third judicial judge looked at the expression of the Ling Long Palace Lord. Seeing her cold expression, he did not stop the second judicial judge from showing off here. He already had a plan in his mind. It looked like Ling Long Palace Lord really wanted Yiqing Qing to be the next successor to the Palace Lord. It wasn't just the second judicial officer who couldn't understand. Even she really couldn't understand why they had chosen Yiqing Luo. If the Ling Long Palace was handed over to Yiqing Luo, can this Ling Long Palace Hall really survive? However, no matter how many questions he had in his heart, she couldn't bring herself to ask the hall master either. No matter what the reason behind it was impossible. As long as this was the Ling Long Palace master's goal. That was the goal of all of them. At least for now. He still had to obey the Palace Lord of Ling Long Palace. In just a short moment, the tripartite judicator's thoughts had already turned 1,000 times. His eyes moved slightly. She smiled and put on an expression of a peacemaker. Miss Yi, although the second judicial judge's words are not pleasant to hear, she is not wrong. The hall master has taken a liking to you and wants to groom you to be the next hall master. This means that he appreciates your abilities and you as a person. If you become the next palace master, the entire Ling Long Palace will be yours. I'm sure you're aware of the Ling Long Palace's position in Jianghu. If you become the Ling Long Palace Lord, it will absolutely be 100 benefits and no harm to you. The third judicial judge's words invisibly stirred up the second judicial judge's nerves. Originally towards the fact that Ling Long Palace Lord had taken a liking to Yiqing Luo to become the next Palace Lord, he was already filled with puzzlement and displeasure. Now he was stimulated by the words the entire Ling Long Hall is yours. Although the second preceptor was a little angry, but he was not a fool either. She targeted Yiqing Luo in such a manner. If Yiqing Luo really became the Ling Long Palace Lord, she was definitely the first one to be punished as a warning to others. Second judicial officer's eyes flashed past a vicious glint as he looked at Yiqing Luo with jealousy and hatred. She clenched her fists tightly and cupped her hands towards the Ling Long Palace Master. Lord Palace Master, this subordinate feels that she does not have the qualifications to become the Ling Long Palace Master. Not waiting for Ling Long Palace Lord to reply, she continued. The reason why Yiqing Luo came to Ling Long Palace is because she killed Shadowless City's mysterious maiden Mu Qiulan. On top of that, without embroiling city's goddess Qiao Yulu had died at the hands of the Palace of Gloomy Darkness because of her. Now, in less than a day since she arrived at the Ling Long Palace, she has already torn the Ling Long Palace apart. He provoked enemies everywhere and indirectly caused the death of our new female disciple who just entered the Ling Long Palace. At this point, the tone of the second judicial officer became obviously indignant. Lord Palace Master, she carries the blood feud of too many Ling Long Palace disciples. The Palace Lord of Ling Long Palace slowly shifted her cold and gloomy gaze onto her because of the second lord's words. The coldness that shot out from his eyes. It was like frost, causing one to tremble with fear. The second preceptor felt a chill down his spine when he saw that gaze and shivered. Chapter 41-49. If it wasn't for the Overlord, she's nothing. I can't accept a waste becoming the Palace Lord of Ling Long Palace. After second judicial officer said this, she didn't forget to flatter Ling Long Palace Lord. The only Palace Lord that I can accept is only you alone. But Ling Long Palace Lord apparently wasn't moved by second judicial officer's flattery. On the contrary, a vicious glint flashed past her eyes. It was fleeting. Second judicial officer didn't notice it at all. She continued to speak with righteous indignation. I still have the same words. A life for a life, it's only right and proper. Even if the Overlord was here, Yiqing Luo would have to take responsibility for the few lives she had taken. Following that, second judicial officer raised her chin up high, putting on a look of righteousness as though she was wholeheartedly thinking for Linglong Palace. Third judicial officer immediately went up and pulled second judicial officer back, persuading, Palace Lord naturally has her reasons for making this decision, we just have to do as she says. You're not feeling well now, so don't stay here. If we were to fight, it'd be bad if you're injured. She called out to the female attendants as she lifted second judicial officer's carriage. On the other side, she looked at the surroundings, at those guards who had just rushed over and weren't affected by the Palace Lord's sinister chi, as she shouted in a low voice, still not going over, take the opportunity to restrain Yiqing Luo. After she shouted this, she pretended to exhort, if she cooperates, don't harm her life. Third judicial officer's words were comprehensive, but it was like a needle, piercing into second judicial officer's heart. This was telling her. Because Linglong Palace Lord was their Palace Lord, so no matter who the Palace Lord wanted to appoint as the next Palace Lord, they could only listen? Their opinions were all useless? Her body wasn't feeling well? Wasn't it because Linglong Palace Lord took the initiative to injure her? Obviously, Palace Lord didn't trust Yiqing Luo, but in order to put on a show in front of her, she injured her. Wasn't she innocent? Autocratic, overbearing and inhumane Palace Lord. A seed was planted in second judicial officer's heart as it sprouted. And on the other side, under the orders of the three judiciaries, the female guards looked at the pale-faced girl who was so weak that she needed the support of the palace master of the Netherworld Palace. Then he looked at the palace master of Dark Palace with fear. Corpses were strewn all over the ground. It was a cruel and bloody scene. They all knew that it was the evil art of the black-robed man. They were also worried that they would be affected by that man, and that they would kill each other with their sisters. What are you waiting for? Do you want me to do it myself? Looking at the hundreds of people cowering in fear, Zhou Xian felt a chill run down his spine. The Linglong Palace master shouted angrily. His face was full of majesty and his aura was suffocating. The moment the Palace Lord of the Linglong Palace spoke, all the female guards felt a chill run down their spines and their bodies trembled. The group of them immediately charged towards Yiqing Luo like wolves and tigers. Yiqing Luo, hold on tightly to me, I'll bring you out. The Palace Lord of Abyss Palace's 5 fingers clasped tightly onto Yiqing Luo's arm, trying to pull her into his embrace. However, his fingers had just exerted force. Suddenly, an invisible wave of air hit his finger. His 5 fingers instantly felt a numbing pain. He shook for a moment as his 5 fingers released Yiqing Luo's wrist. His palm was empty. The person in front of him turned into an afterimage as it flashed past his eyes. The Palace Lord of Abyss Palace's face under the black robe had a huge change as he tried to snatch her back. Chapter 4150. A man dressed in a purple robe descended from the sky. His figure was tall and slender, beautiful and upright. His arms stretched out. In his arms, there was an additional slender red figure. Immediately after, the man emptied one of his hands. His slender fingers were beautiful as he gently waved his sleeves. His sleeves rolled like flowing clouds. A misty, profound glow rippled in all directions, under everyone's naked eyes. When the profound glow rippled, the speed was obviously extremely slow, but it was just a moment's time. Everyone only felt a burst of domineering and oppressive aura instantly exploded. In an instant, all the surrounding female guards who had swarmed over, along with the corpses on the ground, were swept away. The sky was filled with flying stones and blood splashed everywhere. The strong aura didn't stop because of this. Everyone only felt a dull pain in their chest. Their internal organs started to rupture and explode. Bam! Linglong Palace Lord's body, which was standing in the midst of flying sand, was suddenly flipped over as she crashed heavily onto a huge rock which had collapsed not too far away. Her body and mind were in immense pain, which made Linglong Palace Lord's eyes widen. What kind of energy was this? It actually broke through her barrier. Linglong Palace Lord couldn't imagine how she witnessed her own barrier shattering bit by bit in front of her eyes. Ever since she became Linglong Palace Lord, she had never suffered this kind of humiliation. Overlord. It's Overlord. A few exclamations were like thunder as it fell into Linglong Palace Lord's ears. No. Impossible. How could it be Zhou Xian? She had obviously set up an inescapable net near Linglong Palace Lord. Set up numerous arrays. Even if it was Zhou Xian, he would absolutely not be able to barge into Linglong Palace Lord. Linglong Palace Lord forcefully propped up her body as she staggered to stand up and look towards the direction where the energy came from. Profound waves rippled as the energy pervaded. Yiqing Luo was in the arms of a purple-robed man. That peerless face revealed a kind of soul-stirring charm which no one dared to profane. As he lowered his eyes to carefully size up the young lady in his arms, that pair of shimmering peach blossom eyes blossomed with endless coldness and treachery. A strong aura lingered around him. The moment the Linglong Palace Master's line of sight shifted over, the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace Hall looked over. The man suddenly raised his head and a pair of icy cold eyes shot straight at the Linglong Palace Master. Like a sharp blade, it ruthlessly pierced into the heart of the Linglong Palace Master. The Linglong Palace Lord's pupils suddenly shrank and he looked away in fear. Following that, his body became extremely stiff. It really was Zhou Xian. The face of the Linglong Palace Master twisted a little. She knew it very well. Zhou Xian's appearance would disrupt all her plans. Although he had never crossed hands with Zhou Xian. However, he just stared at her. The Palace Master of the Linglong Palace knew. This rumored mysterious and powerful overlord. He definitely lived up to his reputation. When everyone saw Zhou Xian's appearance, his heart was filled with fear. He felt that death was shrouding his body and mind. However, there was one person who was overjoyed. Xian. The girl's clear and sweet voice was filled with joy. She wrapped her arms around the man's neck and smiled sweetly. The young lady's voice made the man's chilly aura restrain a little. He lowered his head slightly and his shimmering eyes were tainted with a thin layer of evilness. His eyes were as black as a lake, so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. Yiqing Luo knew that he was angry because of the injury on her body.